Welcome back. It is always a good day. When I wake up, I give thanks, and the realization comes over me that it is my day to step out in my darling little studio in San Diego, California, and introduce you to another amazing person, one with quite a story. This topic that we're going to discuss today, arguably the hardest topic surrounding death. Death, dying, grief, afterlife, all of that stuff that I love to feature on the next room. This one um, just makes individuals highly uncomfortable. But this needs to be discussed. And we are opening it up wide today because the person that is coming on the show has opened up her heart and has poured it onto paper and has come up with just an incredible story about her son. Judi Merriam is my guest today. Sorry, I just asked you too. It's Judi Merriam. Merriam.
Miriam,
Merriam,
Miriam.
just like the
That's
dictionary.
okay.
Okay. Judi is a wife, a mother, a singer, a performer, speaker, author, and now with this new memoir, it's Empty Shoes by the Door. I'm holding it up for the YouTube fans. You can see all my little notes because we are going to dig deep today. Um, oh boy. Okay, Judi, talk to me about Jenson, your son who died by suicide.
My son Jenson, yes, died by suicide 12 years ago, this December 23rd. He took his life 2 days before Christmas, totally unexpectedly. We were completely blindsided. And I know people say that, but we truly were. We did not see signs of depression. He was typically my most joyful child, my most loving child, my kindest child. And so he threw our community as a whole, and I'm in the Capital District in New York State. He really threw the whole Capital District into turmoil with his decision to end his life. And it's been a long recovery period, and I guess we really never recover. But Jenson's choice to leave left a never-ending hole that will never be filled again. And we continue to walk that journey, and my family continues to deal with the carnage of his choice.
Wow. And you have you're speaking of your rest of your family
Yes,
who is living, your husband, and you have two other children.
yes,
Um, he was 18 years old, correct?
yes. He had just turned 18 as of November 5th.
Wow. So he had just turned 18. Totally did not see this coming.
We really didn't. And we racked our brains and we talked to his friends and we talked to his girlfriend and even after I mentioned it in my book, his doctor came to the memorial service. He'd seen his doctor since he was born, and his doctor took me aside when I was at the doctor's office for my daughter's physical in January and said, Judi, I went through all my records. I could not find anything that would have ever led me to think that Jenson would take his life, except that sometimes the kindest, most thoughtful, creative, sensitive, tender-hearted ones are the ones that make this choice.
Oof. Wow. I'm so glad you brought up the doctor. That's exactly what I was hoping for because here you are reeling as a mother and a father and a sister and a brother. And you're at your wit's end and you're trying to investigate why. And good for that doctor to pull you aside and say that to you, because at least it probably gave you a little peace of mind that you weren't going crazy, not being able to know your own child.
It certainly did, Jane. It silenced for a while that continuous loop of guilt that plays in our brain in trying to figure out what we possibly missed. And I am eternally grateful to him. He didn't have to do that. And he only knew I was in the office with my daughter because his staff went and told him.
Wow. Yeah, he did not have to do that. Now, Jensen did leave a suicide note.
He did. Yes.
Did that help at all?
It really didn't. It left more questions. I'm sure it helped on some level, Jane, because all of the suicide survivor mothers that I know that didn't get a note struggle terribly. But when Jenson wrote that he loves us all, it's nobody's fault, it was his time to go, he knows now he can't be what he needed to be. What the heck did that mean? We have no idea what that meant. And so if anything, it left more questions of what's he talking about. And
Right.
so, but I'm glad because, we have that note. We have his last handwriting. We have something that was in his hand. So that part is a weird kind of special, but at the same time, it didn't explain anything.
Right. Empty shoes by the door. It's living after my son's suicide. Judi, one of the things I really appreciated about your book, really appreciated, is at the end of each chapter, you have something to consider, because each chapter dives deep. You talk about Jenson's life as a child and a young boy, and then you go into what you were dealing with in the aftermath of his death. So let's talk about the things to consider because I thought they were really well done and thoughtful. And so the book dives deeper from um, a story about Jensen into almost like a self-help guide for other people that may be struggling with suicide. Am I right?
You are right, Jane. That was my goal. I didn't ever want to just be a victim and to just always talk about Jensen. I I wanted to be the person, I still want to be the person I couldn't find after Jensen's suicide. And I wanted to write a book that I couldn't find after Jensen's suicide. I grabbed every book I could read, and somewhere between things that were almost kind of bizarrely practical to, as I'm a woman of faith, as you saw in my book, to a mom saying, well, yeah, my daughter took her life, but God is good and everything's wonderful. And I thought, wait a minute, this is not true. Maybe it is for her, but I did this something to consider because I thought I don't want to just tell Jensen's story and I don't want to just tell my story. I want people to be able to help other people and to help themselves and to know what to do and what not to do and what was hurtful and what wasn't, and to really be grace to people who are suffering.
Well, bravo, because you accomplished it. I really learned a lot, and I haven't had to deal with a suicide up close and personal, as you have. In my family, and I have a very large extended family. But I'll tell you what, I now will keep this as a guide for what to and what not to do and say, because, and I've highlighted a bunch, and I really want to cover some of those because I'm sure I can hear my listeners saying, what are they? What are they? Here's one, something to consider. You have this grief quote. And it says, grief is often singing in my head, but it's not the all consuming wail it once was at Christmas time. For the first couple of years after my son's death, hope is a great gift. And then something to consider for this chapter is I would encourage you readers not to anticipate any kind of response after you've sent a sympathy card, even if you've included a beautiful message of love and encouragement. I love that. Okay, let's talk about that specifically.
I find that people often make someone else's grief about themselves.
Wow.
And if they send something that they spent time writing because they want to make you feel better or say something kind or know they care, then it will make them feel better if you respond and tell them how wonderful their message was. But the
Mm,
reality is, grief is not about the person who gave you something. Grief is a personal thing, and people need to have no expectations for any kind of response because a lot of times they can't respond. And there are so many people that are sending things. We had over 1,000 people at Jenson's memorial service, people that sent cards, people that sent messages on Facebook. I couldn't possibly keep up with all of those. And I, I, it's a horrible burden to place on somebody that's grieving. And we need to give them the grace to just say, I love you. I understand. My heart's with you. And let them not have to have any expectations of responding or saying thank you for the card or reaching out to me. They might eventually, but if they don't, again, it's not about you, it's about them.
Good for you. I absolutely loved that. And I found it very, very helpful, not just in cases of someone taking their own life, but in all instances, because grief is difficult, no matter if it's a child, a parent, a best friend, a neighbor. It is tough. And so for us to release that expectation of, oh, I sent this beautiful card and I need to be patted on the back for my lovely words of condolences. It's like, no, you don't. We can't expect anyone, especially a woman in your shoes, to have to go through that. Um, wow, that was really helpful. Um, let's talk about the inappropriate, in my opinion, this is me saying this, the woman who quoted some Bible verses to you um, about you tell the story. Just go ahead and tell the story because I got very upset with this woman.
Well, I think I had a few stories in there. I probably took on the evangelical church as a whole in my book because the very people that say they love God the most were often the most hurtful. And I have heard that from so many people grieving. Again, expectations of how we're supposed to grieve. And I, I first of all, I started hearing Romans 28 all the time, that all things work together for good for those who love God. And we've so mistranslated that verse. That is not what that means at all. Yes, there's redemption, but God doesn't send us pain and he doesn't take the lives of our children so that he can teach us some greater good.
No, he
So
does not.
I really took that on quite a bit with people. And then you're probably referring to the Sunday school teacher who told me in a woman's Sunday school class, when I was still only a couple years out and not even comfortable in Sunday school yet, saying, didn't I feel like God had given me such a great gift of entrusting me with Jenson's suicide because
Mm.
I could deal with it. And I didn't take her on. I'm sorry I didn't take her on. That is one thing I wish I had done, but I didn't know how to do that then. But it was the whole idea that afterwards I wished I had said to her, oh, which one of your daughters would you like to die by suicide so you can share the same gift that I got from God? And I realized that the church as a whole does not do grief well. Just because we believe in heaven or we believe in a savior or we believe in God doesn't promise us an easy life here. And it people think they're guarantees. People think that, oh gosh, well, why are you still sad? You believe in God. Well, I'm sorry, but to quote the Bible, it says Jesus was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. So let's get that right. He gets our pain. So to then tell people that they've been given a great gift by God. There was another woman that told me that, God must think I'm so strong because he's trusting me with this. And you know those don't make people feel good. Those destroy people. Those comments, taking scripture out of context. I know they think they're trying to help. I truly get that. But I wished I had learned to call people out on those things earlier on and to let them know how wrong those things were and just what they do to people who are grieving.
Right. Yeah, empty platitudes. It's
Empty
crazy.
platitudes, that's a great yes.
That's absolutely wild. Okay, boy, Judy, what a strong woman you are. I am, first of all, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story and writing this incredible memoir, Empty Shoes by the Door. I will have all the links that you need so that you can support Judy with this and her journey in I don't like to call it healing because I don't think we ever really truly heal from something like this. I think maybe we just learn to live with it, whatever that is, that grief is. Let's talk about your obituary stance because I was reading that and I'm like, right on, good for you. Share with us what happened.
I wanted to be totally honest in Jenson's obituary. And so when I wrote it, I was probably at that time dealing with life a little bit better the first week or two than my husband was. I think it was, everybody grieves so differently. And my husband was not dealing well at all. And I understood that. So I said, I'll write the obituary. And I chose to write chose to write, Jenson took his life at home. And our our undertaker is a personal friend. I had his children as students, and he called me and he said, "You can't put it in that way." And I said, I want to put it in that way. And he said, "Well, no, you can't. You need to write something like happens unexpectedly or suddenly." I said, "You don't think that every time somebody writes that, people don't know it's a suicide?" And he said, "Well, but if you say he took his life at home, it makes people uncomfortable." And part of me finally said, I don't care. I don't care if people are uncomfortable. It's not about other people. It's about my son. And I want to speak the truth. And Jane, that's been my brand from day one, the truth and transparency, because I knew I couldn't move forward if I wasn't truthful. And so even Brian, my husband, finally said, "Judi, let's just do what he says." And I said, "No, I'm not going to. I'm going to speak the truth. He took his life at home, and that's what I want in the obituary." And finally, the undertaker said, "All right." And he put it in that way. And even afterwards, Jane, I'm so glad he did. I'm so glad I stuck to my guns. But afterwards, I had people I didn't even know sending me messages saying, "Thank you for being honest. Thank you for being truthful." And that was all I needed to
Yeah.
to continue on being honest and truthful.
Well, I found it incredibly refreshing. And there's something to consider after that story. Um, and this is something I had not thought about, but it goes from your stance with Jensen and how you wanted to be truthful about his exit from life as we know it, to Will's. Let's talk about children turning 18 and having a will. Most children that age or parents would never even think of something like that. I think that's an important topic to cover. So please share.
Oh my gosh, it was so difficult to take care of all of the mess of Jensen's finances and paperwork because he didn't have a will when he turned 18. And we so wish he had. And we tell everybody now, please make sure that the second your child turns 18, they have a will, because otherwise, if they die, not just by suicide, but in an auto accident or anything, the family's left picking up all the pieces. And those pieces are really hard to pick up. We had to do all kinds of jump through all kinds of hoops. We had to close down one account and open another. I had to go down and sign paperwork when no mother should have to go do that. My husband was trying to negotiate that. And if Jensen had had a will, it would have been so simple. It wouldn't have been a big will. It just, we could have closed out his savings account, his college funds, without having to do what the state told us we needed to do in order to do that. And the reality is, almost nobody we dealt with was kind and tender-hearted. They
Hmm.
were really difficult to work with. Like there was something wrong with us that we were doing this, and that just made everything worse.
Yeah. Well, good. That's really necessary information. I bet this is going to give a lot of parents that aha moment. This brings me to my next sticky note, stigma on survivors left behind, the shame and the guilt. Do you want to go deeper on that for me?
Sure, Jane. Uh, Even in this day and age, there's still a stigma for suicide survivors. Thankfully, at least we're talking about it now. When I was a teenager, nobody ever talked about it. It was taboo. that was still when the Catholic Church was espousing that if you took your life, you went to hell. So,
Please.
it was just a huge mess to ever talk about suicide. And part of it, I've realized, first of all, the survivors are dealing with terrible guilt. But secondly, they're also dealing with other people thinking there's got to be something wrong in that family because otherwise a suicide would not have happened. Or there's got to be something wrong with that child, or there's got to be major dysfunction because people don't take their lives unless there is. And we were an example of, yeah, we weren't a perfect family, but there wasn't major dysfunction. And yet we lost a son to suicide. And even Jenson's youth group leader at that time went to the pastor of his church and said, "What's wrong in the Merriam family that Jenson would take his life?"
Oh
And
my goodness.
and it was things like that. And it was people avoiding us at times. And it was people just kind of turning and going in the other direction or smiling and then getting away as fast as they could, because I know that that stigma revolves around suicide. I hear it from other suicide mothers all the time. And these are beautiful women that I now am friends with. And none of us are any kind of different family than anybody else out in the world. But we have this idea that everything must be so broken for a person to take their life, especially a teenager. And it needs to stop because the guilt is difficult enough without other people acting like there's really something wrong with us.
Yeah, no kidding. What is with the judgment? I mean, here you have been through the most horrific thing, the loss of a child. No matter how it happens, it is something that no parent ever wants to experience. So why the judgment on how Jenson passed? The fact that he passed is horrible enough. I mean, you need compassion and love and counseling, which leads me to my next sticky note. Let's talk about the counseling because you went to the first counselor and I literally wanted to slap his face.
So did
Could
my
not.
husband.
What was that?
So did my husband.
Yeah, well,
My husband wanted to punch his lights out.
yeah. Well, I don't punch people's lights out, and I normally wouldn't slap a face either, but this guy deserved it. What the heck? Tell me about here you are in deep in your grief. You're trying to get out and seek guidance and support because you're looking for someone that specifically deals in suicide, which is key. Tell me what happened.
Well, first of all, because it was at Christmas time, it was really hard to find a counselor. A lot of people take time off at Christmas time.
Sure.
And secondly, I was adamant personally, again, if we saw anybody, that it had to have been somebody that dealt with a suicide, that actually had had a family in counseling that had had a suicide in their family. So our one of the groups that we were involved with offered to pay for us to go to a counseling session with a Christian counseling association, and we went to this. Sat there. When we went in to his office, I said to him, "Have you dealt with a suicide before?" And this was the key, Jane. He said, "I can do that." I should have known he hadn't. I don't believe he ever did, but all he did was sit there with his paperwork to do an insurance intake, which
Oh,
he didn't need to do because it had already been paid for. And we didn't know
right.
if we were coming back. This was less than 2 weeks after Jenson took his life. This was a man who claimed that he knew God and was compassionate. And he talked so much about the insurance intake that our two living children had almost no time with him. And my husband was beside himself. And we walked out of there feeling like we had been left to drown when we had gone looking for a lifeline. And we were so lost. We didn't know where to go after that. And he really failed us. So consequently, I never have sent anybody back to that practice again because of his behavior.
Oh, yeah. That's not even a 1 star on Yelp. I would tank him. Like, that's just ludicrous. Um, did you find the proper person? Did you find good counseling?
We did, and I'm eternally grateful to her. She actually came through hospice. We
Good.
homeschooled our children, and one of the
Okay.
moms,
You
pardon
said,
me?
you said hospice, so you're going to have to explain. I did not know that until I
Oh,
read your book.
yes. She
Okay.
came through hospice, and I would never have thought to go to hospice.
Me
But one
neither.
of the moms in our homeschool co-op was a nurse with hospice, and she knew of this woman. She'd asked this woman to come in and talk to all of the teens in our co-op, because this woman goes into schools and does suicide counseling after a teen takes their life.
Mm,
So this mom talked to this counselor and asked if we could see her, and she agreed to it. And it was such a gift. It didn't cost us anything.
wow.
And she was our lifeline. She was the person that actually gave us tangible things to do to save us, at least for the first few weeks when we were having horrible dreams and reliving certain things. And since then, I have found, even through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, they actually encourage people to look for counseling in hospice, because there are counselors out there who have in hospice who have dealt with suicides, and they know what to do.
Wow. That's fantastic. Well, good. I am so glad that you found the right person. Um, on page 110, I highlighted a suicide changes the rules of death. What exactly did you mean by that?
We expect that our elderly family members are going to die. We prepare for their death. We make sure everything's set. We make sure that they have a comfortable death if we know they're dying. A suicide robs us of any kind of planning, any kind
Mm,
of preparation, any kind of emotional well being, of saying goodbye, of sitting holding someone's hand when they pass. And it leaves so much carnage behind. Death in itself is hard. It's hard to say goodbye to somebody. It's
sure.
hard to be the people that are left behind, whether we believe in heaven or not. And suicide robs us of any of that and leaves questions and anxiety and stress and over a death that didn't need to happen, that could have actually possibly been prevented had the person talked to us.
Right. Let's talk about something to consider on that chapter because it's another very astute point about if you want to reach out and see someone that has gone through a tragedy such as you have, that's great. But then what was your experience? Tell me there's something to consider about if you want to spend time with someone who's grieving, then do so. If you don't, then don't.
A lot of people say, I want to get together. A lot of people say, let's do lunch. A lot of people say, I'd like to be there for you. And words are easy to say, and I've done it myself. We say things because we think it's going to make something better at the moment. But because a suicide death is so different than other deaths, it makes people really comfortable. So a lot of people say things, but they don't really want to follow through. They don't really
Mm,
want to sit with you. They don't really want to hear your stories. It makes them uncomfortable. And I think part of that is out of fear. Part of it, if they're parents too, is, could this possibly happen to me? We are now a reminder that it could happen in another family. So I wrote that because, if you want to be with somebody, fine. But if you don't, that's okay too. Don't subject them to keep saying, let's get together, when you have no intention of ever getting together.
mm.
Because all that does is kind of leave a bad taste in their mouth of, well, maybe you're lying. Maybe you really don't want to get together.
Exactly. And why say it if you're not going to follow through?
Yes.
Okay, this was in capital letters in the book on page 136. I hate you, God. Let's talk about the anger.
Oh, anger is such a part of a suicide death. And Jane, part of the reason I wanted to be transparent and truthful is I still have a lot of students that I get to get past students that I get together with a lot. And this next generation under us, my children's generation, they're not willing to put up with all the stuff that we were willing to put up with. And they don't have the same, their faith doesn't always look the same as our faith. And I thought, all right, I did hate God. And I want people to know that. Some people don't know what to do with me when I say that in a nice little church setting. They just really don't. But my guess is a lot of them
You're
have thought
sitting there
that.
alone. You're alone in the pew and everybody's moving away.
I'm sure some people think I'm going straight to hell because I told God I
Oh,
hate him.
please.
But I was angry. I was angry because to the best of my ability, I had done everything I thought I should do as a wife and a mother and growing up and serving and doing what I was told to do and raising my children. I was the way I was supposed to. And all of a sudden, none of it mattered anymore because Jenson took his life. And where were all my God guarantees then that I was
Right.
promised if I behaved properly? And I'm so glad that I let that anger out. God already knew what I was thinking. Why would I hold it inside?
Oh, yeah.
It was after that, when I admitted the anger, that I started to feel a sense of freedom. Okay, I've said it. I'm still alive. A lightning bolt has not struck me dead. Where am I going to go from here?
Right.
And I think I wrote at that point, I stepped over the line I drew in the sand and allowed God to redefine a lot of my faith that
Mm.
I had been incorrect about because of the things other people had told me.
Mm. Wow, Judy, that is very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Um, After hating God comes a reconnection to your faith. And then I love this laughter. Talk to me how you get to laughter after going through what you went through.
Oh, Jane, laughter is so important. Jenson was a comedian. He was a filmmaker. He did comics. Jensen did things to make people laugh. All his movies, all his comics. And laughter is a huge gift. And I got to laughter because I realized it's really okay to laugh. And we needed to laugh. I wrote in my book that that winter after Jensen died, Brian and I watched a sitcom every night that made us laugh because we just needed the relief of those
Oh,
endorphins. And we slept better and it allowed us to function. And we also knew that if Jensen was still with us, he would want us to be laughing about so much. And laughter is, at first, it almost feels wrong. At first, it feels unfaithful to the person who died, but it's a gift. It helps us get through so many things. I mean, even apart from suicide, how many times a day do I laugh at absolutely ludicrous things in this world that make no sense?
mm,
And I am so glad for the gift of laughter. And I'm glad that Jensen gave us the gift of laughter. And I'm glad that we still have his things that made us laugh. And, sometimes we're laughing and crying at the same time, and that is perfectly okay.
right. Yeah. I didn't know Jensen, but the way I feel is that he would not want you and your other son and daughter and your husband to be sad for the rest of your lives. He wants you to laugh and be joyous. I think you honor him more in that space of joy, just because he was a joyous human being, just because of whatever struggles he had, and he decided to do what he did. And you will know, you'll have the whole story someday.
Mhm.
Um,
And I, along with that, Jane, I so agree with you that he would want us to be joyful and laugh. And I also realized that if I stopped laughing, that it would be like two deaths. It would be another death.
exactly.
And why? For what
Right.
purpose?
No, you have two other living children that you
Yes.
need to be a fantastic mother for. And that's just so important. we're getting close to the end. This is so good. We're running long, but that's okay, Judi, because this is incredibly important for my listeners to hear. Um, do you speak to Jenson? And have you had any signs at all from him?
It's funny that you say that. Uh, yes, I do occasionally, not much. The first thing I said to Jensen was soon after he died. I said, Jensen, what the hell were you thinking? But then, as other mothers have shared with me, I almost get jealous that they talk more to their child who died and see more things. The only sign I had that I truly believe was a sign, and I don't know how it all works, and I don't obsess about it, but I seldom remember my dreams. I've only dreamt about Jensen twice. One of the dreams I had within the first or second year was wanting Jensen back so badly. And in my dream, Brian brought him back in bits and pieces until Jensen was a whole person. And yet
Wow.
I looked at Jensen and he looked so sad,
Hmm.
so sad. And I realized he doesn't want to be here. He is happy in heaven. And why would he want to be here again with the mess that we see so often? And it was almost like at that point, I was able to say, okay, here you go, be where you need to be, and
Mm,
we'll continue to live as best we can.
mm. Wow. You are a strong woman. Empty Shoes by the Door, Living After My Son's Suicide, Judi Merriam. Here is the book for you YouTube people. I will put a link for the book. I will put the suicide prevention. I will put the hotline numbers and the crisis support. All of it will be on the show page. Judi, in closing, is there anything you'd like to share or any final thoughts that perhaps I didn't ask?
I think the one thing for anybody who's listening and is grieving, just grieve it all. Let it all be what it is. If we grieve the way we need to, we come out the other side in a healthier way than if we just do nothing or if we just hold it all in. And my favorite word is grace. My mantra is by grace I rise. I had it tattooed on my arm last year and it's on my website. It's on everything that I do that way. And just know that there is grace even when it's so dark, and that the grace will eventually be stronger than the ungracious places that you're walking through at any moment if we just hold on. And it's hard to hold on. I get it. I I truly understand it, but if you can hold on, there is grace and there is redemption. I see things now that I never would have believed I could have seen when I was in the midst and so of the grief and so close to Jenson's suicide. And you
Mm.
know what, too, Jane? I am always willing for people to reach out to me.
Oh, thank you
That's
for
what
that.
I love to do. I told Jane earlier, I love to be the person that I couldn't find, to sit with somebody in their ashes of their pain, to answer questions, to be what you need. So if anybody would like to reach out to me, I am more than willing to have people reach out to me, to ask me questions, to tell me things. Those kinds of things bring me redemption out of my own pain.
And the best way to reach you is through the website?
Through the website, that would
Okay.
probably be best. There's a place on my website where you can email me, and my email address is on there. And actually, some of my
Okay.
dearest friends are friends now because they reached out to me after they read my book or they've heard me places. And I love these women who are suffering as much as I've suffered. And I have
Mm.
a real heart for moms, especially who've lost children.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for the transparency and your honesty. And just, right before we started to record, you said, Jane, I'm an open book. Anything you want to ask me. And I feel that with you, that you are here. And, could be part of your purpose. Your God-given purpose could be this education. And who knows, Judy, you may be saving, hundreds of other children or mothers to suffer by your transparency and your honesty with your journey with empty shoes by the door. One can only hope, even if you save one child from making that decision. Job well done.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much for listening to The Next Room. A show that I thought was going to be difficult, Judi made it very easy for me. Not the easiest topic, but one that we really need to break down the barriers and the stigma and just talk about it. Because through our education of what it is and why perhaps these young individuals are taking their own lives by their own hand, maybe we can help and turn around, and maybe somebody's listening to this right now and they will choose not to do that.
But
Would
may
you
I say one more thing, Jane?
please do?
One of the things that I regret the most is that I did not talk to my children about suicide.
Ah,
And that is one thing I would encourage all parents to do. We assume it's not going to happen to us if we're somewhat functional and have a somewhat normal family, but it
right.
happens to anybody, to anybody. And I will always regret that I didn't say to my children at any time, if you are considering taking your life or if you've had those thoughts, please talk to me. And I encourage parents now, it, no matter who they are or how old their children are, when their children are old enough, talk to them about suicide. Make it comfortable and easy for them to come to you without overreacting and falling apart or anything, because if they can talk to you, you're more than likely to know if something's going on and maybe prevent that suicide.
Beautiful. I have nothing more. Thank you for listening to The Next Room. I appreciate you. Thank you for the downloads and sharing it. And please do yourself a favor and pick up Judi's book, because it's really quite beautiful. I know that sounds funny to say, but it is a beautiful memoir. And you really bring Jenson front and center. What a character, what an interesting child. And I didn't even get to ask all the fun questions about him. But maybe you can come back and do a show a little later in the new year. So thanks again to Judi Merriam, my guest on The Next Room. I'll talk to you again next week.